I'm going to check the interior of this vehicle to ensure that all the gauges are working, and then test the air brakes to ensure that they are working. So the first thing I would do is engage my pedals, my brake, my gas, and my clutch to ensure that they're not sticking. I would also compress my clutch and go through my gears to ensure that they are all accessible. I would put this back into neutral, and then what we're going to do is turn the gauges on to test the ABS, the water, the oil, the volts, the PSIs, and the fuel that are working correctly. So I've turned this on. ABS is showing. It goes off. All my gauges went to the right and back to the left and now into their positions. The water, and then I'm going to turn the truck on to make sure that we get good reads on these. So I'm going to push the clutch in, make sure that we're not in gear, turn on the tractor. I'm going to let the clutch out. I'm going to let this idle for a minute. So right now we have a beeping sound in the cab, which is indicating that there's not enough air pressure in the vehicle for air 1 and air 2 for the brakes. This is a service brake and the emergency brake. So both of these have to be built up to 120 to 125. So we're going to give it some gas. The sound that's beeping will go off at around 90 psi when it tells it it's at a safe zone. So it got to about 80, 90, and the emergency light went off, or the emergency signal went off, which is a sound. And now we're going to pressurize this up to 120, 125. At that point, at 120, 125, the air pressure will cut off, and it'll no longer be pumping air into these brakes.
Pressure?
Yep. So what I'm going to do is there's a 4-step process to test the air emergency brakes in this vehicle. So what you want to do is make sure that you pressurize the brakes up to a 120, 125 PSI. And then after that, what we're going to do is shut the vehicle off. We're going to shut it completely off, and then we're going to turn the ignition back on that powers up the gauges. Then what we're going to do is push in the parking brake to release the trailer brakes.
Tractor brakes.
Tractor brakes. And then this first test, we're going to test that when we push the pedal for the brakes, that it only releases up to 4 psi in 60 seconds. So we're going to push that pedal and compress it for 60 seconds. Here we go.
It's been about 20 seconds.
You kind of know it's working.
Yeah.
All right, so we had this compressed for about 60 seconds. And then I pulled my foot off the brake. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to test the emergency braking system to make sure that this comes on during the proper procedure. The procedure that we're looking for is we're going to fan the brakes to release all of the pressure. When this pressure in these brakes get to about 60 psi, a warning light is going to go on. That warning light is going to tell us that we have a problem with our air braking system, and we have a little bit of time to correct it. If we don't correct it, we need to get off the road, because when this gets down to between 40 and 20 psi, the emergency brakes are going to kick on, which means all the air will be outside of the brakes, and the springs in the S-cam brakes are then going to apply and lock the brake drums up. So what we're going to do now is start fanning this brake to get down into the 60 to hear that the indicator light goes off first. So we're at about 70 psi, going to 60, and that warning light has come on, so you can hear it beeping. So now the next thing that we want to do is take pressure out of these brakes down to about 40 or 30 psi. It's usually between specifications is 40 and 20. We're going to take that psi down, and then this parking brake right here should pop out, indicating that the springs have engaged. So here we go. And there it goes. So this now has released. In an emergency situation, the springs in the trailer would have locked up, and that would not be movable. Okay. Did I go through all the good? So we're going to turn this vehicle back on. What we're going to do now is we're going to test the gauges in this cab for accuracy according to the manufacturer specifications.
There, you want to get the gauges?
All right. So what we're looking at is the water gauge first. We want to make sure at idle that's between 150 and 190, or 170 and 190.
190 for temperature.
So this will sit for a while. You just want to make sure this doesn't go above 190. Then we're going to get down to the oil pressure gauge. At idle, that should sit between 20 and 40 psi. Is that correct?
20 and 50.
20 and 50 psi.
At idle.
At idle. So right now, it's idling about 30, which is good. The voltmeters at idle, we want to make sure that this is running between 12 and 14.
And what should the oil pressure be while operating?
Operating oil pressure should be between 40 and 60. So idle, it's 20 and 40. Operating, it's
idle 25 and 20. Operating 40, 60.
okay.
5 and 20.
Oil pressure idling is 5 and 20. Operating is 40 and 60.
Yep.
So then our air brakes right now, you can hear the indicator light, which is telling you that there's not enough air in the brakes. So when we look over at the brakes, air 1 and air 2, they're at about 60. At about 90, these will start to, that light will come off. So we're just going to build this up. We also want to check the RPM. So we have the gas on, and we're checking the RPM gauge works.